The blood on my saddle had gone tacky in the heat, and I knew if I let my eyes close, I would not open them again. I had ridden 4 days without a name. That was the whole of my plan, to be no one, to be a rider on the moon road like any other, to see with my own eyes whether a single true door was left in all the reach. My counsel had smiled at me and lied to my face for a year. My own steward had let the border burn so the tolls would rise. I had left my crown in a locked chest and ridden out to learn who the frontier really was when the king was not watching. I had learned. That a man alone on the sunder marches is a purse to be cut, and I had 3 cuts in my side to prove it. Garrick Vane's tollmen did not know they had put a blade in their king. They had seen a dusty rider with a good horse, and that had been enough. Now the dark came down purple over the flats, and the first cold of the desert night reached through my coat, and somewhere ahead of me a lamp was lit. One lamp, a low roof, a rail, a trough, a way station at the edge of nothing, its shutters catching the last light. My mare smelled the water before I did and carried me the last half-mile on her own good sense, because I had none left. I remember falling more than dismounting. I remember the gravel and the taste of it. I remember thinking, so this is where it ends, at a stranger's rail, with no name to give them. And then a door opened and a woman's voice said, not afraid, not curious, only steady, easy now. Don't try to stand, I've got you. She had me. That is the plain truth of it, and I will tell it plain because she deserves nothing less. A woman half my size got her shoulder under my arm and took the weight of a man who had led war bands, and she did not so much as grunt at it, and she carried me in out of the dark. The lamp inside was yellow and warm. There was a table, a hearth low with coals, a floor swept clean as a chapel. She set me on a bench with my back to the wall and knelt and pulled my coat open, and when she saw the blood she did not gasp or fuss. She only pressed her hand flat to the worst of it to stop the bleeding and looked up at me with gray eyes gone very calm. "You'll live," she said, "if you let me work. Will you let me work?" "Yes," I said. It came out a rasp. "What's your name?" And there it was, the question I had run from for 4 days, the question that would end the whole test if I answered it true. I looked at her, this small brave woman with my blood on her hand, and I found I could not lie to her and could not tell her. "Does it matter?" I said, to the work. Something crossed her face, not suspicion, only a kind of tired recognition, as if she had met 100 men who could not give their names and had stopped needing to know why. "No," she said, "it doesn't matter to the work." She rose. "Then I won't ask again. Sit still." She never did ask again. In all the days that followed, she never once asked me who I was. I have been bowed to by 10,000 throats and named king by them all, and not one of them ever gave me what that woman gave me in that first hour, which was to be tended for no reason but that I was hurt and at her door. She heated water. She had a needle and a good thread and a hand that did not shake. She washed the cuts and she stitched the deepest of them, and when the needle bit she talked to me low and even to carry me over it, not soft nothings, but true things, the price of thread on the frontier and the trick of a clean stitch, and how her husband had taught her to sew a wound before the fever came for him 3 winters back. "You keep this place alone," I said. "I keep it alone." She tied off the thread. "There's no one to keep it with." She should have been afraid of me. A woman alone, a strange armed man bleeding on her bench in the dark of the marches. Every cent she owned should have told her to bar her door and let the desert have me. She was not a fool. I saw her mark the sword I'd worn and the quality of my mare through the window and the hard old scars on my hands. She saw a dangerous man, and she took him in anyway because the alternative was to let a hurt thing die at her rail, and that she would not do. I have ruled by strength my whole life. I did not know until that night that there was a courage that had nothing to do with strength at all. Her name was Nessa. She told me that much freely, the way you tell a stranger the name of your station, because he'll need to know what to call the roof over his head. Nessa of Halloway Station, the last stop on the Moon Road before the Sunder crossing, 40 miles from any pack and further than that from any mercy. I want to tell you what happened when her hand first touched my bare skin, and I have turned it in my mind 100 times looking for the right words, and I have not found them, so I will simply say what was. I have been a rider all my life. I do not mean I sit a horse well. I mean that some men are built to arrive and some are built to go, and I was built to go, never a night in one bed twice, never a border I did not ride, a restlessness under everything like a road that would not end. My father had it and his father before him. We are a line of men who cannot sit still, who mistake motion for peace. When Nessa pressed her palm flat to my side to stop the blood, the road went quiet in me. All of it, the whole endless going. For the first time in a life of riding I had arrived. I lay on a stranger's bench in the middle of nowhere with 3 holes in my hide, and I felt, for the first breath since I was a boy, that there was nowhere left I needed to go. It was so strange and so total that I made a sound, and she thought I was in pain and gentled her hand, and I could not tell her that it was the opposite, that a thing 40 years crooked in me had just come straight. And on the inside of her wrist, where it had rested against my ribs, a mark had risen, pale silver like frost that would not melt, in the old shape our line has carried since the first moon. She did not see it. She was watching my face, but I saw it, and I knew it, and I understood in one terrible instant what I had ridden out to find and had not once thought I would. She was my fated mate. This overlooked woman keeping a dying station at the edge of the world was the one my blood had been riding toward for 40 restless years. I closed my eyes so she would not read my face, and I lay very still, and I let the truth settle over me like the cold coming down outside. Because here is the trap I had ridden into with my own 2 hands. I had come out unnamed to test the reach, to see who was true when the king was only a rider. And the first door that opened to me freely, at real risk, asking nothing, was hers. If I named myself now, I would never know. I would never know whether she'd have been kind to Torin, king of the Reach, with his crown and his coin and his 1,000 riders, or only to the nameless bleeding man he'd been at her rail. And I found I could not bear for her kindness to be a thing bought by my crown. I had been surrounded my whole life by love I could not trust. Here at last was one I might. I only had to keep silent long enough to be sure. So I kept silent. Fool that I was, I kept my name behind my teeth, and I let her believe I was no one, and I told myself it was to test her when the truth is I was afraid that the crown was the only thing about me anyone had ever wanted. I stayed at Holloway Station 11 days. The fever came the second night, as she'd feared, and she sat up with me through it. I do not remember much of that night except her hand cool on my forehead and her voice saying, over and over, "You're all right. You're all right. Stay with me now," talking me back from the far edge the way she'd talked me over the needle. In the gray of morning the fever broke, and I woke to find her asleep in a chair with her hand still resting on my arm, holding a stranger to the world by main will, and I lay there and looked at her and felt the whole shape of my life turn on its hinge. When I was strong enough to sit up, I learned her station and her days, and I learned the frontier she held together with nothing but her own stubbornness. The Moon Road was the only way across the Sunder for 100 miles. Every trader, every drover, every poor family fleeing a failed claim came through it, and every one of them needed water and a roof and a door that would open. There had once been 4 stations on that stretch. Now there was one, because Garrick Vane had bought or burned the other 3. Vane called himself the hold master of the crossing. He had a fort at the Sunder Ford and 40 tollmen, and a writ from my own faithless steward that let him keep the peace on the road, which meant he taxed everything that moved and preyed on everything that couldn't pay. The 3 burned stations had refused his tolls. Nessa's had refused them too, for 3 years, and it still stood only because she was cleverer and harder than Vane had bargained for, and because the drovers loved her, And because so far it had cost Vane more men than it was worth to take a station, a woman defended with a shotgun, and the loyalty of every honest rider on the road. "He'll have it in the end," she told me, on the 5th day, not bitter, only clear-eyed. We were sitting on the porch in the long gold evening, and she was mending a harness, and I was watching her hands. "He's patient and I'm one woman, but not while I can still stand in the door." She looked out at the flats going bronze. "This is the last place on 40 miles of bad road where a body can come in from the dark and be safe and not be robbed for it. As long as it's mine, it stays that way. That's all, that's the whole of it." That was the whole of it. She was not fighting Vane for glory or for spite. She was holding the one honest door on a cruel road because someone had to, and no one else would, and it cost her everything and gained her nothing but the knowing that she'd done it. I had ridden out to find whether one true thing was left in all the reach. I was sitting next to it, mending harness, unaware that the ruined stranger it had saved was the king who could break Garrick Vane with a word. And I said nothing. Every day I said nothing. Every day I told myself I would tell her tomorrow, when I was sure. And every day the not telling grew heavier, because every day I knew her better and loved her more, and the lie of my silence sat worse on me. I learned that she gave away more than she took. A family came through on the 7th day, a man and his wife and 2 thin children, burned out of a claim upriver, with nothing left but a mule and a memory of a brother in the West. Nessa fed them and would take no coin, because they had none, and when the man tried to leave her his good knife in payment, she folded his hand back around it and told him to keep it. He'd need it more than she would, and to send word when they reached the brother so she'd know they'd made it. That was not a woman keeping a business. That was a woman keeping a light. I learned she was lonely in a way she never once spoke of. I learned it from the way she talked to her horse, and from the second chair on the porch that no one had sat in for 3 years until I did, and from the small startle in her when I laughed once at something she said, as if she had forgotten the sound of a man laughing at her table and had to remember how to be glad of it. I learned, God help me, that she had begun to love the nameless stranger she'd saved. She never said it. She would sooner have walked to the Sunder and back than say it to a man who wouldn't even give her his name. But I saw it in 100 small tendings. The way she saved the best of the meat for my plate, the way she found reasons to sit on the porch when I was there, the way her steady hands went not quite steady the one time I caught them changing my dressing and did not let go. And I was a coward. I let her love a nameless man because I was afraid to find out whether she'd love the king. I have done harder things than that with a clearer conscience. On the 8th day, 3 of Vane's tollmen rode into the yard. I was in the barn and heard them before I saw them, the swagger in the way they came, men used to yards going quiet when they entered. I came to the barn door and saw Nessa step out onto the porch with her shotgun broken open over her arm, easy, like a woman come to talk about the weather, and I saw that this was a dance they had done before. "Widow Halloway," the lead man said, all false courtesy. He was broad and easy in his saddle, and there was old cruelty worn smooth in his face. "The hold master sends his respects. The toll on the crossing's gone up. Roads dangerous these days." He smiled. "Bandits, you heard about the bandits?" "I heard," Nessa said. "Funny how they only ever rob the folk who won't pay Vane. Funny old world." His eyes went past her to the station, to the good roof and the full trough and the smoke from her chimney, and I saw the wanting in them, plain as hunger. Hold Masters raised his offer for the place. Fair price now, more than fair, for a woman can't hold it much longer anyhow. He leaned on his pommel. Sad thing, a woman alone way out here. Anything could happen. Fire, fever, bandits. He let the words sit. You want to think hard about that fair price, widow, while there's still a you to take it. I have killed men for less. I stood in the barn shadow with my hand going to a sword that was not there, my whole body one cord pulled tight, and it took everything in me to hold still, because I was a wounded nameless rider, and if I stepped out and broke that man's neck the way every nerve in me wanted to, I would bring Vane's whole fort down on her the moment I rode on. So I held. I stood in the dark and watched 3 men threaten my mate to her face, and I did nothing, and it was the hardest thing I have ever made my body do. I need not have feared for her. "You've said your piece," Nessa told him, and her voice never rose. She snapped the shotgun closed. The sound was very loud in the yard. "Now here's mine. This is Holloway Station. It's been an honest door on this road for 30 years, and it'll be one till I'm in the ground, and I'll thank you to tell the hold master that the next man he sends to threaten me on my own porch had best come himself, because I'm tired of talking to his errand boys." She lifted the barrel, not aimed, just lifted, just a hand's width, just enough. "Water your horses at the trough if they're dry. That much I'll give any traveler, even yours. Then get off my land." They watered their horses. Small men love to pretend a retreat is a favor. And then they got off her land, and the lead man turned at the gate and looked back and said, "Soon, widow," like a promise, and rode into the dust. Nessa stood on the porch until they were gone. Only then did I see her shoulders come down, and see how her hands shook when at last she let them, and understand what that flat steadiness had cost her. She had faced them down alone 40 times, and every time it took a piece of her, and every time she paid it, because the door stayed open, or it didn't, and there was no one else to keep it open but her. I came out of the barn. She turned and saw my face, and being who she was, mistook my fury for fear. "They won't come tonight," she said, gentling me the way she'd gentled me over the needle. "They like their threats to ripen. You're safe here a while yet. You're safe here." She said it to me. She, who had just stood alone against 3 armed men and would stand against 40 when they came, was reassuring the king of the whole reach that he was safe under her roof. That was the moment I stopped being able to bear my own silence. "Nessa," my voice was not steady, "there's a thing I have to tell you, and you're going to be angry, and you'll have the right of it." She set the shotgun down against the rail and turned to face me full, and her gray eyes were tired and brave and open, and she waited. And I could not do it, not then, because I looked at her standing in the wreck of what those men had done to her nerves, and I understood that if I named myself now in her fear, with Vane's men just gone, my crown would come down over everything between us like a lid. She would not hear "I have loved you these 8 days. She would only hear the king. Every kindness she'd given me would curdle into a thing she'd given the king unknowing, and she would never be sure of her own heart again, and neither would I could not give her the truth in the middle of her fear. It would break the one clean thing. So I did a coward's brave thing, or a brave man's cowardly thing. I have never decided which. "I've stayed too long," I said. "You've healed me, and I've brought Vane's eye down on you by being here, and I won't do more of that. Give me till morning to be fit for the road, and I'll go, and I'll not repay your kindness by making you a target." I made myself hold her gaze. "But I'll tell you this true, whatever else I've kept back. In 40 years of riding, I never once wanted to stop until I came to your door. Whatever I am, and I'm more than I've let you see, I am from this day yours to call on. You won't understand that yet. You will." She looked at me a long moment. Then she said quietly, "You talk like a man leaving a debt he means to pay." "I am exactly that man." "Then go pay it," she said, "if you must. But you didn't bring Vane's eye down on me, Ryder. Vane's eye has been on this place 3 years. You've been the only thing under this roof that wasn't a burden to me in all that time." She picked up the shotgun and turned to the door and stopped, and did not look back, and said the bravest thing I ever heard her say. "I'll be sorry to see the road take you. That's all. I'll be sorry." And she went in. I rode out before dawn. Not away. Never away. I rode the 4 days back to the nearest of my hidden waypoints, harder than the wounds should have let me, and at a stone shepherd's hut on the old drover's track I found what I had arranged to find if ever I needed it, my chief outrider, Halden, and 40 of my own riders, waiting on the king's word. Halden took one look at the state of me and went white. "Sire, your side." Later I said. I got down off the mare and I stood in the dust in my ruined coat, and I felt the crown settle back over me, cold and familiar and heavy. And for the first time in my life I was glad of its weight because of what I meant to do with it. "Halden, Garrick Vane, the Sunder Crossing. Tell me everything my steward has been hiding." He told me. It was worse than I'd guessed. Vane and my steward, the tolls skimmed and split, the 3 burned stations, the drovers robbed under the king's own writ, the whole rotten trade of it, a piece of my kingdom sold off in the dark while I sat blind on my throne. I listened to all of it, and I did not rage, because rage is a small thing next to what I felt. I thought of a woman alone on a porch with a broken shotgun over her arm, holding the last honest door on a road my own crown had let rot. "We ride at first light," I said, "all of us to the Sunder Ford, and Halden one thing more." "Sire, there's a station on the Moon Road, Holloway. We ride past it to the ford, and no man of mine so much as raises dust in her yard without cause. Is that understood? That door is under the king's protection from this hour, and any man who forgets it answers to me." "Understood, sire." He hesitated. "May I ask the woman who kept it? She's known to you." I looked out at the flats, gone silver under the low frontier moon, the same moon that hung over her porch 40 miles east. "She's known to me," I said. "She saved the king's life without knowing she'd done it and asked nothing, and threatened Vane's men to their faces to keep a door open for strangers. She is the truest thing in all my kingdom. The mark she did not know she wore rose in my mind, silver on the inside of her wrist. And before this is done, if she'll have a road-worn fool who lied to her by keeping his name, I mean to make her queen of the Reach." Halden, who had ridden with me 20 years and never once seen me look at any woman twice, said nothing at all for a moment. Then he grinned, the old wolf, and said, "Then we'd best go clear the road for her, sire," and went to wake the riders. We took Vane's fort at the Sunder Ford at noon 2 days later, and it was not much of a fight, because tollmen who prey on the weak have no belly for a real one. Vane himself I took alive, blustering about his writ, waving my steward's seal in my face, until I let him see, at last, whose face he was waving it at. I watched the color go out of him. I watched a man who had threatened a widow on her porch understand, all at once, exactly who had been bleeding on that widow's bench 11 days before, and exactly what that meant for the rest of his life. I did not kill him. A dead Vane is a martyr and a story. A living Vane, stripped of everything, sent to labor on the rebuilding of the 3 stations he burned, is a lesson every toll lord on every road in the Reach would hear and mark. My steward I dealt with in the old way, and I will not trouble a gentle telling with it, save to say the Reach is cleaner for his going. And then, with Vane's fort taken, and the road broken open and free for the first time in 3 years, I rode back to Holloway Station at the head of 40 riders, in the coat of a king, to tell a woman the truth at last and pray she could forgive the man who'd kept it. I will remember what I saw as we came up the Moon Road as long as I live. She was on the porch. Of course she was on the porch. Word of the fighting at the ford had come up the road, and she had heard 40 riders were on the move, and she did not know whose 40 they were, and so she had done the only thing she knew how to do. She had come out onto her porch with her broken old shotgun over her arm, one woman, to stand in her door against whatever was coming, because someone had to and no one else would. She stood there small and straight in the gold evening light, ready to face 40 armed riders alone, and I reined in at her gate, and my heart was so full I could not speak. She did not know me. For a breath she did not know me. A king in a good coat at the head of a war band is not a bleeding stranger on a bench, and her eyes went over me hard and wary, looking for the threat. And then they found my face. And I watched her understand, piece by terrible piece, the way Vane had understood, but oh, so differently, the road-worn rider, the man who wouldn't give his name, the one who'd said I'm more than I've let you see. I watched her look at the crownwork on my collar and the riders at my back and the man inside the king, and I watched her go very white and very still. "No," she said, "just that, not to me, to the whole shape of it." I got down off my horse. I crossed her yard on foot, alone, and behind me. I had not ordered it, they did it of their own accord, every one of them. Behind me, my 40 riders swung down from their saddles in the dust of her yard and knelt. 40 of the hardest men in the Reach knelt in the dirt before a widow's porch, because they knew what she was to their king, and because the story of the woman who'd saved him had already run through the whole band, and because some things a rider kneels for without being told. Nessa looked at 40 kneeling men in her yard and at me standing at the foot of her steps, and the shotgun slid down from the crook of her arm, and she caught it without looking, the way she caught everything, and she said, in a voice I had never heard from her, small, cracked open, "Who are you?" "Torin," I said, "of the Reach. They call me the Alpha King." I made myself say the rest, the hard part, the part I owed her. I rode out unnamed to learn who was true in my kingdom when the king wasn't watching. I was robbed on your road and I bled at your rail, and you took me in and asked nothing, and you saved my life. And I knew what you were to me the first hour when you put your hand on my side and my voice went, and I let it. She'd earned my breaking, and the road went quiet in me for the first time in my whole life. And I was a coward, Nessa. I kept my name because I couldn't bear to learn you'd only have been kind to the crown. I let you believe I was no one. That was the wrong done to you, and I own it. And I've ridden 2 days to give you the truth and stand here and let you tell me what it's worth. She came down her steps, slowly. She stood in front of me close, and she reached out, and I thought she might strike me, and I would have taken it. And she turned my collar in her fingers, the king's collar, and then she looked at my side where her stitches were, her stitches, holding a king together under a king's coat, and something broke open in her face that was not anger at all. "You let me stitch a king," she whispered. "You let a king be worth stitching," I said. "No one's done that for me in 40 years. And then, because she was who she was, because even now she thought first of others, she looked past me at the 40 men kneeling in her dust and said, appalled, "Get up. Get up, all of you. You'll ruin your knees. The ground's full of stones. Halden, is it? Get them up and get them watered. There's a trough. It's honest water. It's the one thing I've always got." And her voice cracked entirely, and she pressed the back of her hand to her mouth, and I did the only thing left to do. I took her hand, the one with the mark on the wrist she'd never seen, and I turned it gently and showed her the silver frost mark that had risen the first hour under my ribs, that had been deepening every day she tended me, and I said, "You've been marked as mine since the night you carried me in from the dark, and you never knew it, and I'm asking you now, in front of every rider I've got and the whole free road, not because you saved my life and not because of any debt, asking you plain. The way you'd fold a poor man's knife back into his hand, will you keep one more door open? Mine. Will you be queen of the Reach, Nessa of Halloway, and let me spend the rest of my riding days finally arrived?" She looked at the mark on her wrist. She looked at the kneeling men getting up and going sheepishly to water their horses at her honest trough. She looked at the king standing bareheaded in her yard with his heart in his open hands, and she was quiet a long moment, my brave, steady, overlooked woman, the truest thing in all my kingdom. "You could have told me," she said. "You could have trusted me with your name. I know it. It's the one thing I'll spend my life making up to you." "Yes," she said, "you will." And then, because she was not cruel and because I had seen it in 100 tendings before either of us had a word for it, she let the smallest smile come. "You said you'd be more than you let me see. I didn't think you meant this much more." She shook her head, wondering. "A king. I fed a king my second best stew and made him sleep on a bench." "Best I ever ate," I said. "Best I ever slept." And she laughed, the sound I'd startled out of her once on the porch. Only now she didn't have to remember how, and she put her hand, the marked hand, flat against my side where her stitches held, and the road went quiet in me all over again and stayed quiet and has stayed quiet from that day. We did not marry in the great hall of the Reach, though I offered it. She wanted it on the porch at Halloway, with the low frontier moon coming up over the flats and the trough full and the door open. And so that is where it was, the Queen of the Reach wed in the yard of the last honest station on the Moon Road, with drovers and poor families and 40 road-worn riders for a court, and every one of them given water and a roof and a place at the table, because she would not have it any other way, and neither, now, would I. Halloway Station is a king's station now. The door stays open. No traveler is turned from it, and no traveler is robbed on the road it guards, and the 3 burned stations stand again, rebuilt by the man who burned them. My queen still keeps a shotgun by the door out of long habit, and still saves the best of the meat for my plate, and still folds the poor man's payment back into his hand, and I have stopped riding out to test who is true in my kingdom, because I found the answer at a stranger's rail with 3 holes in my side, and I brought her home. Every evening we sit out on the porch in the 2 chairs in the long gold light, and when the cold comes down and the great moon rises over the marches, my queen puts her hand on the old scar under my ribs without thinking, the way she's done 1,000 nights, and every time the road goes quiet in me, and I am, at last and for always, arrived.